All right, lastly, before we get started, I was talking about Pluralsight. They also gave me a bunch of cards that has a code on the back. If you're interested, I'll pass these around. Just grab one. But it's a free month. You don't have to put your credit card in or anything to try it out for a month. So they gave them to me to hand out, and it's free, and I like free stuff. So I'll pass them around. If you want one, just grab it. And if the person in the back, whoever ends up with them, could sneak them down here to me, that'd be good, so I can give them away to other people who may want them. All right, we'll get started. Welcome to Full Stack JavaScript. Disclaimer, I am not a professional JavaScript developer, and I've kind of poo-pooed JavaScript my entire software development life, and I've only recently gotten into JavaScript and started to enjoy it. So I'm going to, I realized when I was doing my applications, I do a lot of mobile applications as well, that you can create full JavaScript stack applications, mobile device, web front end, web back end, and database, all in JavaScript. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So for those that don't know me, I am Grant Shipley. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Moved there a couple months ago. Before that, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work at Red Hat, based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I manage all of their cloud stuff, primarily platform as a service, things like that. Been there for 8 years, almost 9 years. Before that, I worked at Novell on the iManager team, which was like their management suite for eDirectory. And Kepler, was that what it was called, the LDAP directory? Kepler, wow, that's a long time ago. And before that, I worked at Caldera. So I've been fortunate in my career to only work at Linux companies because I live and breathe and die Linux, which is why I'm using a MacBook in the presentation today. But I am a huge Linux fan. But unfortunately, you have to use a MacBook to do iOS development. They have me handcuffed. I've been a Java developer for most of my career, probably about 15 years. Got into mobile when the Palm Pilot first came out a long time ago. In fact, that was my first job at Caldera, was to write a calendar sync application to the Palm Pilot based on some open source project. Big database guy as well. I do a lot of open source work. Most everything I write or contribute to is open source related. I don't work on any proprietary software. Not saying it's bad, it's not something I enjoy doing. So who are you? Hopefully you guys are interested in JavaScript. So I've made some assumption is that you care about writing JavaScript applications. You want to learn how to create scalable JavaScript applications, and you want to learn how to use JavaScript to create a full stack application. If that's not a fair assumption, you have my permission to leave. So that's what we're going to be talking about. All right, so we went over most of this stuff in the trivia portion, but JavaScript was created in 10 days in 1995 by Netscape. It was named Mocha. They changed their name to LiveScript and changed their name to JavaScript, all within a period of about 6 months. And like someone in the audience said, they did it just to ride on the coattails of Java. Java was just released, and it was going to be the savior of the world, and you were going to be able to write once and run anywhere, and so they wanted to tag along with that. And it was useful for making blinking HTML pages and under construction animated GIFs and nice flashy professional-looking web pages. But then in 2005, a project called jQuery came about, which really, in my opinion, is what catapulted JavaScript to be a viable technology for browsers. It makes it so much easier. It integrated nicely with this new thing they used to call AJAX request, which really wasn't new, but they just called it AJAX and moved on. Appcelerator was created in 2006. Some of you may never heard of Appcelerator, but we're going to be using that in the talk as well. They were created in Atlanta, Georgia, and then moved to the Valley in California a couple of years later. 2009, Node.js was announced, and I'm still amazed at how popular Node.js has become in just a few short years. The two big companies behind Node.js right now are Joya and Strongloop. They're both vying to be like the enterprise Node.js company. So Strongloop was created by Isaac Roth, who oddly enough was my boss at Red Hat, he left Red Hat, started Strong Loop, hired away a bunch of Node.js core contributors, and started this company in San Jose to allow enterprise class Node.js applications to be created with trusted NPMs. If you don't know Node.js, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But when you specify your NPM dependencies in the package JSON file, it'll go out to Strong Loop server and download the NPMs, which they have a security team to make sure that they're stable and secure and everything like that. So that's their play. And if you guys follow Node.js, you probably see these two companies fighting all of the time. If you're familiar with the recent stuff that went on with Ben's a core contributor who works at Strong Loop. A community member submitted a pull request, which is a patch, if you're not familiar with Git, to replace a pronoun in a comment from his to her, and he rejected it. Joy created this big blog post about how Ben should be fired because he's sexist, egotistical, because he rejected this text change, and so Strong Loop had to come out with an apology. Yes, we should have never used his. We should have used his or hers or they. And so a lot of this crazy stuff goes back and forth between these two companies, and it's like theater every day, and I love watching it. All right. In 2009, MongoDB was released by a company called Tenjin, who Matt, who was doing a talk before me, works at now. He went over there a couple of months ago. What's interesting is Tenjin, who created MongoDB, was originally a cloud platform as a service company, kind of like Google App Engine, OpenShift, Heroku. But they quickly found out that scaling databases was the hardest thing about cloud computing. So they were working on their own database to scale up as part of their cloud platform as a service. And their engineers had more fun working on the database than they did the cloud stuff. And so they switched their company direction pretty much overnight to become a database company. About 6 months ago, they also changed their name from Tenjin to MongoDB to focus entirely on the database. So those are kind of the players that we're going to be talking about. So JavaScript, everyone hates it, right? Raise your hand if you don't hate JavaScript. Look at this, you guys. But outside of people who actually use JavaScript, everyone does hate it, right? In fact, there's fan sites about JavaScript and how people hate it, right? I kid you not, I just Googled JavaScript sucks, and this was the first link. They have their own Facebook fan page. But yeah, and I grabbed this from 2013. There's also a lot of books written about JavaScript, but the one on the left is probably the only one you need to know, which is the good parts about the language. And these are O'Reilly books. So why does JavaScript have this stigma around it, right? It's always been considered by people who think of themselves as real software engineers who went to get a CS degree and all this stuff as a toy language, right? That has no use. It's just used for making annoying web pages. In fact, most hardcore Linux guys still disable JavaScript in their browser because they're fearful of it. A lot of people think it's only good for client-side validation on forms. You can't do anything else with it. When you type in your username, you can make an AJAX call to see if the username exists or whatever else. But they don't even believe that should be on the client side. They think all of the validation about if something's a valid email address should be done on the server side, because someone could rewrite the JavaScript on the client side, put a valid email address in, and save it to or put an invalid email address in, save it to your server. And it's never been considered a real programming language. But I happen to love JavaScript, and I was one of those guys who hated it for so long. I looked down on JavaScript developers as like a lesser type of software engineer. And I know I've since repented and seen the light, so maybe I'll still make it into heaven because I love JavaScript now. But it is easy to code in once you understand it. Coming from a traditional programming language like Java, it's really hard, and that's my favorite part, is you get all these people who talk bad about it, who are spending their days in Java or C#, and they come to Java, and it throws them for a loop because they don't understand callback hell once you get into that stuff. And it's just a completely new way of thinking. You can do anything in the world you want to do with JavaScript. There's a library out there for pretty much everything. It does run pretty much everywhere. And it's a tool that you can use to accomplish most jobs, whether you want to do a mobile app, a server, a client, or a database. So I'm going to show you my JavaScript A team that I use for most of my applications. So the first thing I do is I do a lot of mobile development. And we're going to stop these slides here pretty soon, and then the rest of the time is going to be like hands-on demo type stuff. But Accelerator Titanium is a mobile development framework where you write in JavaScript and it runs natively on the device. What's the biggest competitor to Titanium? PhoneGap, that's right. PhoneGap sucks, though. The reason I don't like PhoneGap is because PhoneGap runs inside of a web view container on the mobile device. And so really what a PhoneGap application is it creates a web browser and just runs code inside the web browser, from my understanding. I've only developed a couple applications in it. Titanium, on the other hand, gets compiled down natively and runs a little bit faster than PhoneGap. However, some great, fantastic applications have been written in PhoneGap. Probably not going to be popular with this crowd, but Untapped, which is a social beer drinking application, it's probably the most popular one in the world, is written in PhoneGap. It's very popular. With Titanium, you can build, test, and deploy applications, both to the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store and the Amazon Store and the Barnes & Noble Store and every other Brothers Android store, right from inside of the IDE. You can run things on the device from inside of the IDE. You can set breakpoints and debug either in the emulator or simulator and on the device inside of the IDE. And I love it, but I also hate it, and I'll explain why I hate it sometimes. But it is open source. It's free to use. It doesn't cost anything. And that's what I use for my mobile stuff. For the database, I use MongoDB. And MongoDB is a document-oriented database where everything is stored in JSON documents. It's non-relational. So if you're familiar with Oracle or MySQL, where you have referential integrity and cascading deletes and things like that, forget about it. It's not going to happen in MongoDB. And MongoDB is really user-friendly in that if you... I'm logged into MongoDB right now. I have a database called SMS messages that I'll show you in a second. But if I misspell SMS messages, and I want to save like username Grant. I get this right. Hopefully you guys can see that. This collection, which you can think of as a table, doesn't exist in the database. But because MongoDB is so user-friendly, I can save it, and it just goes about its merry way. It doesn't give me any error message or anything. And this will bite you so many times because you'll have a typo in your code, and you can't figure out what's going on, and it turns out you saved it in a different collection or something, right? So be aware of that with MongoDB.
Did it take that somewhere? Or did it just
Yeah, it did. I can do db.smsmessages.find, and it created that document for me. One of the nice things about MongoDB, if you're familiar with JavaScript and you want to understand what your query is actually doing, you specify your query here and then you put parentheses on the end. If you don't put the parentheses, it'll display the JavaScript source code that the database is running to execute your query, so you can, inspect it and figure out what's going on. And that's true with any query. All right, back to the presentation. It is an open source database. Their contributor agreement is not so great if you actually wanted to contribute to it, but 99.999% of people use open source software but don't have time to contribute back to it, which is fine. But you can do so if you want. It was designed for highly available and scalable applications. Creating replica sets are very easy with MongoDB, and creating what's called shards. Everyone hates that name, But basically splitting your data out between multiple databases and then doing like MapReduce algorithms to join it all back together is very easy to set up with MongoDB. Some of the big people who's using MongoDB are like Foursquare for check-ins and stuff like that. I would not, if my bank used MongoDB, I'd probably switch banks. It's not a transactional system, so like you can write some data and it'll have eventual consistency, but if you're doing a check-in on Foursquare, it doesn't matter if all the replicas don't have it for 5-10 seconds, right? But if you're depositing and withdrawing money, it probably matters. But it is getting some use in a lot of the enterprises as an additional data store that people can use, because it was created for modern day web applications and mobile applications, whereas traditional relational databases have been around for 30 years and they're a pain to work with sometimes. And then for the server side and the web front end, I've been using Node.js. But lately I've been using Vertex. Has anyone heard of Vertex? Vertex is really cool, and I'm not just saying that because I work at Red Hat and it's a Red Hat project, but Vert.x. It was created by Tim Fox. He created it at VMware, and we liked it so much we hired him away to work on the project. But it's basically asynchronous programming that you can run on the JVM. And so don't let the JVM scare you. The JVM is not just for Java code, and it's probably the most efficient virtual machine system around today. Super fast. But with Vertex, you create asynchronous code, but you're not tied to JavaScript. You can use any language. You can use Java, Python, PHP, JavaScript, whatever you want. It's very similar to the way Node.js works, but you create these verticals, and they can all communicate to one another. It's really cool technology. But Node.js is the most popular right now. It is non-blocking I/O, and you can run the same code on any server. So that was awesome, right? Everyone agree that was awesome? All right. So let's see some demos. I wanted to create something new. So yesterday after the conference, I built this app called Power Ballad. And it's an idea I've had for a while of you could create a game based off of power ballads from the 80s and 90s. It would play like 5 seconds of the song, and then you'd have to guess the band, right? So I'll show you that app. Keep in mind, I wrote this literally in like 4 hours. It's not a real app. I just wrote it to demo some of the stuff you could do. But what's interesting is the app architecture looks like this. We have I'm not that tall, sorry. Let me see if I can draw a mobile device. We have the iPhone here, right? So the iPhone's running the code natively. It makes REST calls out to our Node.js server. The Node.js server sends documents back that contains the song information to play and a URL for the song. The app then makes a request out to another server that I set up that holds the MP3s. So I designed it this way for scalability in mind, because I probably will create a real app out of this and see if people will use it, throw some ads on there, make 5 cents or something. But I did it this way because I didn't want the songs to be on the mobile device, right? Because I wanted to be able to add and delete songs when the music industry sends me a takedown notice fairly quickly. And so I created a Node.js REST server with a Mongo database on here. And so this makes a REST call to Node.js. Node.js looks up the data via Mongoose in the Mongo database, sends this information back, and then this makes a call out to another server I set up that's just running Apache. But this way, if the app becomes popular, which I know it won't because it's not a real app, but in a real use case, you can scale your back end where it's doing the database queries, and then you can also scale the server that's performing your content delivery, the MP3s, or you could move the MP3s out to a free service like Dropbox or something like that, or if you find a cheaper hosting server for a lot of data, you can separate those three. So let's look at the application. I'm going to open up Titanium Studio. This is what it looks like. Oh man, you're asking a lot. How do you do that? Font. Edit. Not 64. Let's try this. Is that better? All right. Let's get some code up here. Dev will show that app in a minute. Here's Power Ballad. You can see that it has Git integration as well. And all of this code is on GitHub, github.com/gshipley. I'll provide the link in a little bit. So let's start with the mobile app, and then we'll go to the server Node.js code. Then we'll look at the Mongo database, and then we'll look at the other server as well. So with Titanium, the first thing that you do is this app.js file, which is kind of like a bootstrap file. So again, this is not like the greatest code example in the world, but I just have a array here of some bands that I put in to provide as choices when you play a song. And then it loads this application window. But let me actually show you guys the app running first. I'll run it on iPhone, and then I'll run it on Android. And then I'll run it on my real phone. All right, so here's the application. Maybe. Come on, Xcode, you can do it. All right, so here it is. Nice cigarette lighter. We're gonna start playing the game here. So you can click on Start Game, and if network is working, it'll start playing a song. It's not, so let's try it again. I didn't do any network error checking code here. Can you guys hear it? Who's that? Guns N' Roses. All right. Correct. Let's play the next song. Who's that? Poison. Correct. One more. Maybe one more. How many do I have in here? There we go. It's only the greatest hair band of all time. Skid Row, come on. Bon Jovi is wrong. All right, so that's the application. So I want to show it to you running on Android as well, just so you can see that this is indeed a cross-platform JavaScript application. And let's wait, 20 minutes while the Android emulator starts up here. While that's going, though, I'll switch over to the dock camera and show it to you running on my phone here, assuming I have network connection. Make sure it's not running. It's not. What? Oh, no. I don't care. If you steal my phone, have at it. I'll just buy another one. Everything about me. Oh, there it is. Power Ballad. So you can see that it has a, come on, app icon. I didn't trouble creating the splash screen, but we'll start the screen or start the application up here. Looks very similar. So if I click this and we see an error, it's because I'm not connected to the Wi-Fi. There we go, on the native device. And you notice the pop-up didn't happen. This is why I hate Titanium sometimes, is because it works on the emulator, which we'll see in just a second, but it doesn't work on the device. And so I got to debug it a little bit because I'm probably throwing an option that I have a HTC That's why I hate Android development, because each device is different. And so I'm probably specifying an option on the option dialog that the version of the bastardized version of Android that HTC has doesn't support. So that's why I hate it. Let's switch back to the laptop here and see if our Android emulator is working. So here we go on the Android emulator. Someone's texting me. Oh, HTC, shut up. Who is it this time? Skid Row, that's right. So you can see that the punch on. And I'm getting a call, sorry. All right. All right. So what I wanted to show you here is even though it's the same code base, it looks like the native app on each platform. So the options dialog on Android or on iPhone slides up from the bottom and it has this Fisher-Price look with iOS 7. And then on Android, you notice, you guys can't see it, but on the device, let me switch back over. Maybe you can see it there. At the top, it has the name and the, whoa, I'm looking in a mirror. What's going on here? It has the icon up here like an Android application should. And then options dialog on Android looks like this most of the time. Right.
Are you writing to that it's rendering native?
Yeah, I'll show you. It's the same exact code base. The framework takes care of that for us. Man, people are blowing me up on text messages right now. And the funny thing about text messages, like 5 years ago, I was like, don't ever send me a text message. If you want to talk to me, just call me. And now 5 years later, if someone calls me, decline. Send me a freaking text message. I don't want to talk to you. But, these new web-based IDEs are coming out, like Cloud9 and CodeEnvy, and I feel the same way about them. I've never used a cloud-based IDE, and probably 5 years from now I'll be using them. But anyway, okay. So back to the code. The first thing I do is require this application window. The application window does nothing except require the first view file. So I'll just show you the first view. And we'll walk through this real quick. First thing I do is create a prototype method on array called shuffle to randomly reorder array elements. Because when I get the JSON document back, I didn't want it to play the same song first every time. So this way I get the JSON document back, and then I shuffle the array to randomize the order. So that's the first thing I do. Let's go down to the main function here, and we'll walk through it. Maybe. All right, here we are. First thing I do is create a background image. That's the lighter thing. I set the width and height. I use percentages. That way it'll scale based on the resolution of the actual device. Instead of doing pixel density, it'll just let it figure it out for you. Left is how far from the left of the edge of the device screen you want to... let me just unplug my phone so it stops popping up with that. How far you want the image to... How far you want the image to come over from the left. Top is the same thing. On iPhone, and this is where you'll see the only platform-specific code, I have the top starting at 5% down because I wanted to leave the navigation menu that shows like the battery and time. Otherwise, it would just override it. So for iPhone, I come down 5%, but then directly below this on Android does this nicely. So I just check if it's running on an Android device, and then I set the top to 0 so it fills the screen. All right, and then I create a game button up here, which is that little start game button that we saw, and it's you just specify properties to these items, and then I add it. Let me scroll back down. Close your eyes if you get seasick. All right, then I add the image, and then I add an event listener. So if you're familiar with GUI development or Node.js, everything is event-driven. So I just add an event listener. When that button's click, I create an anonymous function, and inside of that function, I just call play song with the current song, which is defaulted to 0. So if I go to the play song method, the first thing I do is see if the song to play is greater than the number of songs I have. If it is, I just set it to 0. And then I say I'm playing a song. I set the title to play again. And here's all I do to play this song. I create a audio player with the framework. I pass in the URL of the song, and then I start the streamer, which will actually start playing the song. And then the audio player sends events when the stream is buffering, when it starts playing, the position in the song. It sends an event every second or so. And then lastly, it's going to send a stopping or a stopped event. So I add an event listener for a change on the streamer. I catch it and I say if it's stopping or if it's stopped. Or if it's stopping, I just go ahead and stop it because these are short songs. And then I call song over, which basically is a method to display the options dialog. So I create an empty array. I push in the correct band that's playing, that's attached to the played song. I then generate 3 random artists from that big long array I showed you before, and then I check if it's the real artist is already there, or if the selection's already there, then I discard it and do it over again. And then lastly, I shuffle those options so the correct band's not in the same place every time. And then you set the title on it, add an event listener. So none of that's very, very cool or sexy. But when the app first gets started, this is how I load the songs. I check if it has network. If it's true, then I perform this. If it doesn't, I don't do anything. That's why I was saying if we didn't have network, we'd see an error message. So what I do is I create an HTTP client. I set a timeout for some, what is that, like 10 hours or something like that? I don't know. And then I specify the REST endpoint to pull in my document, which is this URL. So if we load this up in our browser, we should see the JSON that's returned back to the mobile application. It has a URL and the band of the song. So you have to specify this onload parameter. When you send a HTTP request, what do you expect to get back? A response, right? So this onload function is that event handler, the function that's going to get called when you receive that response. Because once you send this request, your application is going to keep on running. It's not blocking while it's waiting for this. So you have to set a function that's going to be called when it gets a response. So when I get a response back, I just call json.parse, put it in my ballads, I shuffle the songs, and then I print them out to the screen. And then lastly, I send the request. So it's going to open this connection. It's going to set the callback function, then it's going to send the request. Okay.
I have a
Yeah.
I've been trying to learn how to use JavaScript. I'm a newcomer, and I'm working with Node and sending requests back and forth. What's the easiest way to send a JSON object through a request to the server? And I know how to get a response back, but what's the easiest way to send an object for doing a complex query or a complex method?
So you mean just a JSON document, the response back? I just put it on the wire. I mean, that's the beauty of like MongoDB and Node.js, because the results I get back from the database are already in JSON, so I just put it across the wire. I don't have to do any mapping or anything like that. But I just use REST.
So if you're doing, like he said, do stringify on the object, but if you're doing that in your object...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Converting. Yeah, there's a few different ways. Stringify you can use. There's a JSONify or something you can use as well. But there are definitely functions out there to convert a JavaScript object to JSON. I see what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that in the get method, you're limited by how much you can send in the URL string. So what method would you use to send a large object back to the server to be
Well,
Do a post request and put it in line.
yeah, if you're sending data, but when you do a GET request, you wouldn't. So GET in REST is for reading only, right? You wouldn't do any write operations with a GET REST request. You would do a put or a post, and then specify it like you were saying as a parameter to that. And then a GET request, the response can be as big as you want. Like I've sent megs back, in JSON with that. All right, so let's look at the back-end code.
Can I ask one question about Titanium?
Absolutely not. Yeah. What's your question?
Support promises?
No, it does not yet. It does not yet. Yeah. Yeah.
When you compile in Titanium for iOS, doesn't it create an Xcode project behind the scenes?
It does. It creates an Xcode project, does all the compilation inside of Xcode, and then uses Xcode to deploy it to the device.
Is it possible to convert a Titanium project to an Xcode project and or a Java?
Oh gosh, I mean, anything's possible, but it would. If you did that, so if you took your Titanium project and when it's compiled into Objective-C, edit it directly in Objective-C, you could do that, but every morning of my life I would wake up crying and contemplating my existence on the planet if I started doing stuff like that. Just because it's going to be translated and it's not going to make much sense, right? It's going to.
I'm just thinking more of like if you wanted to permanently convert it to a native application.
Yeah.
Could you do that?
You can, and with Titanium, you can also use, if you wanted to code a native library in Objective-C to do something on the device to make it super fast, maybe you wanted scrolling menus or something, you can write your code in Objective-C and then include that module in your Titanium project and call out to that as well. But taking Titanium code and starting working on it natively, I don't know that anyone's ever done it, and I'm pretty heavily involved with the Titanium community. I'm a Titanium Titan, if you've ever heard of that. In fact, I'm going tomorrow to keynote their conference in New York, which is why I got to leave right after this. And I've never heard of anyone using it for that. Yeah.
So the JavaScript gets translated?
So that's a very good question. Yes and no. Some of it does, but some of the JavaScript stays in the code, and then they have a JavaScript V8 interpreter that executes some of the code. So it's kind of a mix. All right, let's look at this Power Ballad code. This is the most easy way to create REST services in the world that talks to MongoDB. The first thing I do is I have my server.js, which basically just specifies my route. It requires my PB model, which is my Power Ballad model, and then it creates the HTTP server. If you're not familiar with Node.js, Node.js was created by a bunch of hipsters who thinks that everything is too heavyweight, and so they decided that Apache and Nginx is way too heavyweight for anyone to ever consider using. So their mentality is you create your own HTTP server and run it. So the first thing you do in Node.js is create an HTTP server. It's part of the Express framework, and that's what I'm using here, just to create a server that listens for socket connections and serves up requests. All right, so I am using Mongo for this. If you look at Mongoose, if you look at my package.json, you can see all the dependencies I'm using here. But with Mongoose, you basically create model objects or models. And so I'm creating a schema here called PB schema, which is Power Ballad schema. It's only going to contain two fields, song URL and song band, and it's going to be in the Power Ballads collection in the database. And that's it. That's all I do. I'm done. Oh, yeah, maybe.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I have been using the Mongoose,
Uh-huh.
and one of the problems that I came across is MongoDB is supposed to be schema-less,
Uh-huh.
and with Mongoose, it's like Hibernate, you're going with OR map.
It is.
And each time, like, you want to insert a new
You have to
field.
modify your schema.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the objective of the MongoDB got killed using Mongoose.
Yeah.
I don't see the advantage.
It's a trade-off, right? Using something like this is like an ORM, which is object relational mapping software, if you're not familiar with that. In that, the point he was making, if you remember when I showed you before, I created a document that had a typo in it and it saved it anyway. one of the great things about MongoDB is it's schemaless, meaning you can change your fields that you're storing in the database on the fly, and it'll just happily chug along. His point is that if you do that and you use Mongoose, you then have to come into your code and add the additional field that you've added, or it kind of breaks, right? So that's the point. But anyway, I created song URL, song band, and that's all I do because Mongoose has built-in read-write functions that will, go out and find documents. You just pass in what you want to look for. It'll map it to this, and then you just use it. And so to look at the, and this is part of Mongoose as well, it has all of these functions pre-built in to find by ID, delete by ID, update, all of these database functions that you would want. So I don't have to code any of that. I just have to create my schema, point to the REST service, and it's done. Very easy to do. Okay. So that is the back end. So that's the Power Ballad application. I'm going to show you guys one more application that I wrote just for fun. It uses the exact same architecture for this. I reuse it all the time. All the same tools, but I've integrated with a service called Twilio. Has anyone heard of Twilio before? Yeah, Twilio is pretty cool. It allows you to do voice and data, SMS from within an application or on a phone, right? So you can create a telephone prompting system in Twilio and write it in JavaScript or whatever the case may be. So I was just playing around with it, and I wrote, get out your cell phones. Let me go to twilio.com here, log into my account.
Sorry, one more question for you.
Yep.
Did this work for you with international call? It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
It did work.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you just have to enable it and be willing to pay for it. Yeah. But yeah, it works. Let's run this on the iPhone. And I'll show it on the Android device here in just a second. All right, so what I want everyone to do is pull out their phone and send a text message to my Twilio number here. And keep it clean. I'm in Utah. That should be expected, though. Anything? Anybody say anything yet? There we go. Provo, Utah says first. I got to get a second on here before I move on. Hey, Kimball. There we go. We got some Las Vegas, Highland, Atlanta. Who's from Atlanta? Raise your hand, you Atlanta Bravian back there.
I'm from Atlanta, but my number is.
Well, that makes perfect sense. All right, so what's actually happening here is you're sending a text message to my Twilio number. And my Twilio number, when it receives a text message, I provide a URL that it's going to send that text message to, okay? And the URL is a REST service, oddly enough, written in Node.js and Mongo, that takes that text message, stores the information inside of MongoDB. And then I wrote mobile app that does the same thing that Power Ballad does, just makes a REST service to my Node.js app, pulls those SMS messages out, and prints them on the screen. And you can see that dock camera here. Let me start this application up. Dev. Where are you? And you can see that all of those messages are on the native application as well. I am polling. Yeah, I just do a set interval, which is a JavaScript function to keep calling something over and over based on specification. That's not the right way to do it, but it's good for this demonstration. Someone's trying to hack me with some crazy Chinese or something. Korean.
Thank you.
I'm surprised no one's tried to cross-site script me yet and pop up an alert dialog, which will happen if you do it. I haven't coded around it actually. So let's take a look at this real quick. What I'll do is I'll just show you guys the Mongo database because there's not much to show on the mobile app because it looks very similar. So I'm going to show DBs. Does that work in Mongo? No, show DBs. And let's use SMS talk. And then I don't know what the collection is, so I'm just going to say get collection names. Oh, yeah, here's the one that I had a typo in. So we can do DB SMS messages dot find. And here's all the messages that you guys were sending in. And it comes across as JSON. So we'll take this one, for example. From state is Utah. From city is South Salt Lake. It was I like turtles. And the date was sent at this time, right? And then I can sort based on the date. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with JavaScript, but you can also, because I work at Red Hat and I have 15 minutes left, I want to show you how to scale these suckers up, right? So if I go to my Power Ballad application, when I created this application, if I go to Power Ballad to the web app, if we look at the HA proxy, if I can remember what HA proxy dash status, there we go. So here's the HA proxy service for my server. We can see we have a backend, which is the database, and then a local gear, which is the first Node.js server. So we could do one of two things, but based on time, we don't have enough time. I would generate load to have it automatically scale up because this was all created on OpenShift, and OpenShift will automatically scale applications based on the number of concurrent HTTP requests. But for the sake of this, let's just add a new server to our cluster because we know that Apple emailed us and our mobile app's going to be featured in the morning, so we want to add 20 servers, for example, to handle the demand. So let me see if I can remember the command to do this. RHC app scale up Power Ballad, maybe? No. Too many arguments. Let me check something real quick. I have my note here on how to do it because I always forget. All right, it's RHC app dash scale up Power Ballad. No, what? I don't know. And it's not worth looking at. Suffice to say, you can issue a single command and it'll add additional servers to it, but we don't have much time, and I'm.
And that's using what is it? What?
Yeah, so I'll show you how I created this. With OpenShift, if you want to create a new server, you can just say RHC app create your app name, test, node, pass in Node.js, 0.1, and it'll create that server for you. Node.js, what is it? Yeah. And it's creating the server for me. It takes about 30 seconds. And it automatically puts in HA proxy and things in front of it. So let's get back to the slides real quick and wrap up, or I'm going to miss my flight. But there are some things I wanted to show you. Slideshow, play from current slide. I was going to go into how I've made money on mobile app development because that's what I do in my free time, but we don't have time, so sorry you don't get my famous inside wisdom into making millions of dollars on the App Store. We're going to skip all that. Oh, OpenShift is free to create these backends. It doesn't cost anything. You can create up to 3 servers for free. To sign up for an account, you just need an email address and password. But it is horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling. Vertical scaling in traditional IT sense of the world is throwing more resources at the problem. adding more memory, adding more CPU. Horizontal scaling is like ants going off to decimate a Dorito chip and take it back a billion pieces at a time to accomplish the same problem. So horizontal scaling is lots of little servers clustered serving up requests. And that's what cloud computing generally is, horizontal scaling. That's what OpenShift is. OpenShift supports every language known to man. So if you're not a Node.js guy, you can create your backends in PHP or Java and JBoss and whatever you want. So we do have an O'Reilly book that's going to be released in 14 days. But I have negotiated with O'Reilly to give you guys a free copy of the ebook. If you want, you just go to openshift.com/ebook/openwest, and you can be some of the first people on the planet to have this book. It's not really a book. It's more of a pamphlet. It's only like 90 pages. But it's how you can basically do everything I've talked about today. Walks you through that plus more languages. And it is a free copy. And if you don't want a free copy, I would implore you to pre-order my book that's going to be out, because you get the book and I get money. No, I'm just joking. But this is more of a deep dive. It's like 400 pages on cloud computing and things like that. So lastly, Node.js does rock on OpenShift, which is the team I work on at Red Hat, because it does automatically scale based on the number of concurrent HTTP requests. So you can be assured that your application won't experience any downtime. So let's wrap it up. That's it. If you have questions, I'm always on Freenode in #OpenShift, which is IRC for those that don't know it. Twitter at @GShipley, and all the source code for all the applications, the front end, back end mobile apps on my GitHub account, github.com/GShipley. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully I make my flight on time.